Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. With Formula 1 relentlessly pushing for more races on the calendar in future years, Sergio Perez is certainly not happy with the direction this is taking, saying that if there's too many more races on the calendar, he will not be afraid to quit the sport. Very much intrigued your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. 10 days out only from the Miami Grand Prix. Lots to talk about this though, first of all, because both race directors, Niels Rittich and Eduardo Freitas, have both tested positive. So what this means, I don't know. Whether they'll be okay in time, you'd think that they would be, but if they're not, like, what are they going to do for race directorship? Because they have two this year. If both can't do it, then, is it time for the return, right? We'll just have to see how it goes on this front. Of course, Massey's doing some other thing now at the FIA or whatever they've got him doing, but, this would be, honestly, comedy if he came back for one race, right? I don't think it's going to happen, but it's been all the talk the last 24 hours or so, to be honest. Now, also to mention this, because Ferrari, they're looking to bring some serious upgrades, because, of course, like, Red Bull made a serious step in Imola. Ferrari have to make sure they're not going to fall too far behind. But they've spent the last few days doing tyre testing, so, Sainz has 51 laps, Leclerc 63 laps, and then Tsunoda and Kubica are also in the alfa tauris, giving it a go as well. Now, interestingly enough, it was actually spotted earlier today that seemingly Sainz's kind of unlucky streak is continuing with the engine in his car. This is also pretty cool, the kind of Lambo safety car. I think we should have this more often, to be perfectly honest. But, as you can see, especially in, this image, he's obviously not happy with the state of the car. The engine seems to have kind of blown up in this one, right, with all the smoke coming out the back. So that's certainly, it's interesting, because I'm pretty sure, just looking at the car, you can see this kind of T-wing right here. Pretty sure in most of the teams, the second car, the second driver, if anything, which Sainz effectively is, has the yellow one. So I'm pretty sure Carlos Sainz's car usually has the yellow one of these. So I'm not exactly sure what the situation is with the car, because of course it's got Sainz's number 55 on the front here, but I'm not exactly sure whose car he's in at this point. But still, the engine decided to give up the ghost. So that's maybe not the most ideal sign for Ferrari. Of course, not official testing or anything, at least for the races and stuff, but this is official testing for the new Pirelli compounds they're trying to bring through for next year. So interesting stuff, I thought, no doubt some of these pictures coming through. Now, seemingly though, they're pretty confident in their reliability. So their plan is, after their engine has passed all its reliability tests, to run with more power from the engine in Miami. So we've understood that in Australia, they upped the horsepower by about 5 brake horsepower. They believe there's still more to come from this engine, and I think they believe that the reliability upgrades they're going to have for their second power unit will make it even more powerful. But they might have that potential in the current engine and just, want to rev it up a little bit more, because they're probably going to need a bit more, especially on the big back straights, if they want to compete with Red Bull, especially with how they looked at the most recent race, right? So yeah, Ferrari have kind of approved the fact they're going to run with more power. If the engine explodes as we saw with Sainz, then I guess we'll have to see, because maybe reliability problems won't just come to Red Bull this season, and other cars and drivers could get involved on that front as well. Quick little mention here actually from Mercedes, they just tweeted this out with some eyes emojis. So not really sure what they're thinking or hinting here is, whether they kind of, see an update in the works or something and they're kind of tweeting about it, or whether something else is going on. I guess it remains to be seen. But obviously they're going to look to turn some things around. I believe that they have some ideas and plans in the works for what they can change around in Miami, bring in a few new parts to try and deal with the porpoising issues so they can run the car lower and it actually operates as it has done in the simulations, which clearly haven't translated into reality so far this season. Of course, we've kind of seen so far, George Russell's been the best performing Mercedes driver. He was still about a second off the medium tyre pace that Verstappen was putting up in the Red Bull though at the most recent event in Imola. Then again though, it must be said, because even the McLaren was quicker than him, as was the Alfa Romeo. But when Russell did his pit stop, there was an error when changing, I believe, the front wing angle, so it was effectively still set up for a wet race when he was in the dry, which it was probably costing him a good, few tenths of lap time, potentially, right? So maybe they do feel like that they're taking some steps in the right direction. There's also been a fair bit of controversy about George Russell with regard to the sprint races, whether it's a good idea or not to expand to 6 as we are from this year, or from next year, up from 3 this year. This is what he says in more detail, really. I'm not a major fan of it, in all honesty. It probably needs to be 50% longer, or just that little bit longer, to see the tyres degrading. That's kind of the thing that we did see to a degree at the end of the sprint race in Imola. The fact that Verstappen's soft tyres probably were holding up a little bit better than Leclerc's, but it maybe wasn't quite long enough to really see that in full force, to be honest. And, the drivers maybe need to manage the tyres a bit more, then you can see a bit more difference between the cars. At the moment, everyone's just out there going flat out. There's not enough lap time difference to see overtakes unless you qualify at a position, which is what you saw with some cars. So interesting statements I thought from Russell right here. Look, they're going to push ahead to 6 sprint races, whether they need to change the format to a degree. Some have even been suggesting, look, do it as kind of a standalone race, where you have qualifying and kind of the race as per usual, and then, the sprint race can be like a reverse order grid or something. It would, you could do some cool stuff with it. But as it is right now, I'm not actually sure it adds to the excitement of the weekend. That's just my perspective. You guys, of course, have let your thoughts be known in the comments on the last few days. This also speaking on the other side of the Mercedes garage, none other than Lewis Hamilton tweets out a nice little album cover right here on his Instagram. I guess I don't think he tweeted this, but it's on his Instagram at the very least. Now, well, he says the following: working on my masterpiece, I'll be the one to decide when it's finished. So basically saying, I'm not walking away anytime soon. I'm going to stick with it at least for now. And, the Miracle Academy, certainly they're going to need a miracle this season if, he wants to kind of compete for the World Championship once again. I know that Horner said, look, it's not like he's forgotten how to drive. If the car becomes good, all of a sudden they're potentially a contender again, right? But there's a long way to go on that front, and Mercedes haven't just got one problem to deal with. There's a few, tyre warm-up issues, all this type of stuff that's been discussed the last few races. But yeah, Hamilton making clear he's not going anywhere. I think even Toto Wolff was saying, look, the kind of dynamic behind the scenes between George and Lewis has probably been one of the most promising things out of their season so far, which obviously isn't ideal. But let's talk about these future races then, because lots of talk really the last few weeks. What's going to happen to the calendar? Of course, we've got Qatar, Saudi Arabia, these countries are coming into the mix. A lot of other Grand Prix, and they even want to expand into South Africa. Of course, Las Vegas was announced coming in from next season as well. And then there's been talk, okay, who's going to go? Is France going to go? That seems to be the most likely candidate right now. But even tracks like Spa and even Silverstone, I don't imagine they're going to go. But still, it's on the agenda that maybe they have to make way for some of these other tracks. That's certainly not what we want to see. And I think some drivers have said, look, maybe we kind of do an alternation thing where maybe Spa's there every couple of years or whatever. We want Spa to be there every year, but it's just one of the things that's been suggested, because I believe Lando Norris said in a recent Q&A that his kind of ideal number of races would be about 20. Any more than that, and there's a load of double, even triple headers. The drivers and the teams are all over the shop, no time to kind of practice, prepare, get ready for future races. It's just go all the time. But it must be said that with the direction that F1 is going in, there's a lot of appetite to do more races around the globe effectively, and they want to do an African one as well. This season we have 23 races. That's already quite a lot, right, compared to certainly previous seasons, and they want to put it up even more. I believe the limit right now is maybe 24 or 25 in terms of what they're actually allowed to do. But we've heard some statements actually from kind of the CEO and stuff saying that they actually reckon they could even do 30 or even more based on the interest that they have right now. But Perez isn't happy about this direction it's taking, right? Understandably so. If you're a driver with a family and kids, you don't get to see him, right, if you're jetting all over the world all the time. That's certainly understandable. This is what he says. I believe it was an interview with The Athletic, and this is on WTF1 because you can't really access The Athletic unless you have the subscription. But he says the following, right? The Red Bull driver has admitted that he's prepared to quit F1 if the calendar continues to get any bigger. There is a very big demand. But on the other hand, having too many races is a no-go, at least for me, he says. Right now, you're basically immersed in it because we have so many races. We have simulator sessions before each event. We have partner events to go to, all the stuff they have to do throughout the weekend, the press conferences, all the driving they have to do, the testing even, right, for Pirelli tyres and stuff like this. Look, they get compensated quite nicely, there's no doubt, but still, it is a factor. So basically, we have zero time for ourselves and for our families. I have a couple of young children with a third on the way. If the calendar expands further, I will definitely not do it, right? So that's the thing, Red Bull have to consider this because there's been talk, okay, when are they going to offer Perez his extension? Because I believe his contract comes to an end this season. And I think at this point in his career, he's, quite happy to effectively, have a potentially championship winning car, being in the shadow of Max Verstappen a bit, but, wingman duties effectively. I think he's going to settle into that role quite nicely, and he's willing to sacrifice the possibility of winning a World Drivers' Championship for, trying to win World Constructors' Championship and this type of stuff in a car that can win races. But if this is something that's playing on his mind, right, and he's like, well, I don't know if I really want to compete, right, because if we do go to even, 24, 25 races next year, even more, because, it's been talking about Malaysia, right, other tracks that might come back on the calendar, and they definitely want to push it, as that, well, Stefano Domenicali says, right, there's potential to go to 24, there's probably potential to go to 30, given the interest that we see. They're not going to do 30, but, even 24, 25, that might push Perez beyond his limit, right, who knows? He's obviously got a decent amount of money in the bank. If they do go on to, let's say, win the World Constructors this year, and Perez is P2, P3 in the World Drivers' Championship, he's, I think, 32, 33 or something, he could decide to move on from F1 entirely, right, and then they have to think at Red Bull, who do they bring back into the seat? Is a Gasly an option? That's kind of been talked about, but, Perez has done such a great job for them recently, it'd be difficult for them to see him go, but it's certainly something that's on his mind, given the expansion that's likely to come through next year and the year after as well. So interesting stuff, no doubt. Wanted to touch on McLaren actually real quick, just in terms of the seat for the drivers. Norris, of course, is going to be there for quite some time. The last 3 Italian races he's been on the podium, right, which is rather impressive. Imola, Monza, and then Imola again, of course, well, this year, as we saw just last weekend. But at this also, Joe Soward kind of does the green notebook type thing he does after the events, and he reckons that there's a rumour going around right now that Riccardo might be getting replaced in 2024 or even sooner by Colton Herta, an American driver. I believe he's only 22 years of age. They believe he might be kind of the future of getting McLaren and kind of Formula One in general into the North American side and the US side a little bit more. So that's certainly rather interesting, but that's a legitimate F1 prospect right there. Riccardo out and Colton Herta in, right? So that does definitely, allow the opportunity to, let's say, Perez was stepping away, Ricciardo's back on the agenda for Red Bull, who knows how things can happen, right? So I'm sure the driver lineup in a couple of years' time might look, somewhat different to how it does today. And just to finish off with these power rankings, there's Formula One do after the race. Always when you see this is kind of some interesting stuff. I think most of it is probably fair enough. Lando, George, they had some good races, no doubt. I feel like Tsunoda has been somewhat robbed in a way. I think he got P7 in that Alpha Tauri, which was a mega drive from him. Alex Albon, of course, also had a great race. So I don't know, all the things considered, it's not too bad. I obviously Max Verstappen did have a great weekend. He made a mistake off the line in the sprint race, but apart from that, he pretty much drove flawlessly. But, I never think that's, a 10 to me is like an absolutely perfect weekend. Nothing went wrong. You were just invincible. And in fairness, he did get the Grand Slam, right? So, there is always that led every single lap of the race, all this type of stuff, got pole position, got the fastest lap, all this. So probably that is deserving of a 10, but he did make one mistake, so I might give him a 9.9 or something, I don't know. And fair play to Vettel and Stroll, right? Both getting into the top 10, both getting into the points, I believe, as well. And, they got on the list also. So I thought it was kind of interesting, not perfect, but, it's always tough to make these good, and it's always easier to kind of criticize them than actually make them yourself. But very much intrigued to your thoughts and all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.